Well, I wrote an essay in business school. Teach it was an entrepreneur class. One teacher asked me why I think I'd be a successful entrepreneur, and I said I got fired from my dream job 5 times, and I kept coming back. She was like, "You didn't have to write anything after that." That was my first sentence. I'm gonna make it happen. I'll figure it out. Type mentality is really all you is like what it comes down to.
We have a very special guest on Glue Guys today, an old pal of mine from our days in Houston. I was a Houston Rocket. He was a Houston Texan. He played 6 years in the NFL as a slot receiver. My good friend David Anderson went on to become a founder. He's a pioneer in the data analytics space in sports and founded Breakaway Data. All right, so I think you'll enjoy this conversation with my good friend David Anderson. I want to know, first of all, before we get to athlete data and everything else, how crazy do you have to be a slot receiver in the NFL? I mean, aside from the kickers and punters, you're usually the smallest guy on the field. And, you know, Alex has talked a lot about the monsters that are defensive linemen, especially in the NFL. But you had to deal with some pretty nasty middle linebackers, some pretty nasty, strong safeties. Talk about the mental sanity it takes to be an NFL slot receiver, which you did for 6 amazing years.
And also tell people how big you are.
In high school, I was 6 foot 180. In college, I was 5'11", 190. And then when I got to the pros, I was 5'10.4", 197 pounds. You get slower and shorter as the measuring stick gets a little more accurate. So I went Thousand Oaks High School, Colorado State, played receiver, played running back, played defense, played kick returner, played punt returner. And then Colorado State, obviously punt returner, kick returner, just more, didn't play defense, but receiver. So to answer your question, Shane, like growing up, I played a lot of tackle football and a lot of positions. So the physicality of the game didn't really scare me. And I think that's something kind of gone in today's high school athlete is they don't play offense, defense, special teams. They're almost like we all talk about specialization, but you look at like high school teams, even where I'm from, like I'm like, you just play receiver now? I was like, no, you should play defense. You should play DN. You should play kick return. You should do it all. I think that helped out a lot in like not being scared to hit and be hit because ultimately that's what football is about. I mean, Shane, you were a 6'7", 7th grade tight end and probably didn't like getting hit too much. You're a big target there, but like we've all seen guys that look really good in underwear and 7-on-7, and you put them out there and it just doesn't work for them. I prided myself on being a guy who did well in 7-on-7, but did better in pads and played a little bigger than I wasn't scared to get my, block, get my head in there, throw my body in there a little bit. I think, yes, the thing that you didn't really realize playing professional is you got to find your role rather quickly. Otherwise, you're going to find your way out of the league. I walk into a team when Andre Johnson's our ex. They just had Eric Moulds. They brought up from the Buffalo Bills, and they just signed another guy named Kevin Walter was our Z. Owen Daniels, Pro Bowl tight end, was drafted. He's our Y. We had Arian Foster was our running back. So we had a ton of weapons on offense. We had like 6 Pro Bowlers on our offense. So to find the ball wasn't easy. And this was when Kyle Shanahan and them were kind of slowly coming up, right? So Kyle Shanahan was my receivers coach. Mike McDaniel was my receivers coach. Matt LaFleur was my receivers coach. McVay was my tight ends coach when I ended up going to the Redskins and missing Alex. But we had all those guys. And so like that was that influence of like, okay, now it was slot, but it was really kind of leverage. You're trying to mess with leverage. You're motioning guys in and out. You're trying to get them motion them to get them off the ball so that they have to declare on defense and stuff like that. So it wasn't like slot run down the middle like Peyton used to send Brandon Stokely, right? Murder ball. It was a little different where it was a lot more option routes and stuff like that. And so like, I really enjoyed that offense. I thrived year 3 and year 4. When Kyle left, I struggled. But yeah, you have to have a mentality and like physics aren't in your favor. And I always tell people what was the difference when I played is like guys didn't slow their feet when they tackled me. They would run right through you, right? I have my back to the quarterback or my back to them, face to the ball a lot of times. And they're just running right through you. Or if they catch you on a crossing route, they're running right through you. You see a guy like Gronk run at you, you're like stopping your feet and you're praying that he doesn't run you over. Like they didn't think that when I was coming.
Dave, that's actually, listen, one of the things you said in there was like, I just got used to hitting and getting hit. And I think that mentally, that's like a real thing, right? You just talked about the way you were hit as a slot receiver. So how did you get that resilience? You know what I'm saying? Like, where was it that you just took it and it's just pure reps of, I did it and I didn't have to go to the hospital, so I was okay? Or do you think there's something more inherent about your personality that allowed you to be okay taking those kinds of hits?
I think it's a little bit of both, probably, right? I was the youngest brother. My brothers are 10 and 20 years older than I am, beat me up pretty good.
10 and 20 years older than you.
Yeah. My dad was like the Phoenix, dropping in every now and then. So I got beat up my whole life. And then, I didn't play football till high school. So I was a basketball player. And then I don't know a great way to describe this. Basically, like I was kind of full grown my freshman year of high school. I was 5'10".
5'10.4.
I was 5'10", 180, yeah. But like, so the game wasn't that physical yet, and it was the first time I really played, and I played running back, and so like that it was okay with me, right? I wasn't, I didn't feel like overmatched or out, just kind of beat up on the field my first year. So I got comfortable with the game, got comfortable tackling people. I had a pretty good freshman football coach, like classic Vietnam vet that had like 9 helmets and 2 shoulder pads, and like that's all you got out there. We were gonna tackle and figure it out. But that was how I got used to the game.
Ravi, I view it as like very binary, and I'm only thinking about this because again, like my son just started. He had David freshman football. First like lifting and field work yesterday morning.
Yes.
Wow. Big day.
So he's never played tackle football ever.
Good for him.
He won't hit until training camp, but like the first few times you get hit, Ravi, it's like it is very binary. You either kind of like it, even when you get like someone gets you pretty good and you're like got your face in the mud, like there's a part of you that kind of likes that. Contact and like physicality, or you hate it. I feel like it's like one or the other. And freshman football, usually for a lot of kids, it's their first time. It kind of weeds, kids either there's something about it you like, even if you're the one getting tackled or you don't. The thing that's interesting is that you typically are always playing with your peers, though.
Yeah.
So freshman ball, you're playing freshman or JV, and then even varsity. Like every guy's within 1 year of you, right? So like developmentally, everybody kind of for the most part looks the same. And then you go to college and it's still somewhat similar, right? Like guys are roughly,
except for your boy Bradley
in
Van
the
Pelt.
ballpark.
Yeah, that's that BVP walking around.
BVP, Bradley Van Pelt,
just holding up cheerleaders like this,
walking around. But when you finally get to the NFL, if you do, like that's where you'll be playing with a guy that's 12 years older than you. Right,
Yeah.
like you walk into the league and like I remember seeing Bryant Young, and I'm like, I got no business being in the same locker room with Bryant Young, right? Like I'm staring across at Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher, and I have no business being on the field.
Dude, I got drafted with Mario Williams, who was like,
he's a Goliath
freak, and I was like, you're not even good at football yet, because I remember like they used to do these rookie symposiums. They since threw them away because this is a bad idea to put 300 millionaires in the same room at one time. But I think it was Chris Carter was like, your rookie year should be the worst year of your NFL career. If it's not, you're doing something wrong. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like you're brand new. Like if this is your best year of your career, you're struggling. And I remember looking at Mario. I was like, oh, this is going to be his worst year with that body. I was like, dude, I would love to have that thing.
And they've developed also, to his point of like not slowing down, they've developed this killer instinct. Like when they are like sharks, and they're like when they see the ball, especially like a chance to hit a slot receiver or like to hit a QB, like they are gonna unload everything they have and try and like they're trying to take you out.
Yeah.
Like essentially, do you know what I'm saying? They're trying to like separate you and the ball. Like there's like a focus they have and a strength and speed that just it's everything's
So like
nice.
on our teams, and I wouldn't ever name a name, but we knew like when the game was on the line, there were some guys that would run away from the ball.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone knew it. You had to say it. but there were guys who just didn't want the smoke. Were there guys in the locker room that you knew that didn't like to get hit?
Oh yeah.
That
Even in the NFL.
Oh,
in
yes.
the NFL.
Oh
What?
yeah.
Yes,
Huh.
There's
for
plenty.
sure.
I don't know. I might be overestimating. At least a third, maybe half of the guys don't really, really, really love football. There are guys that really, really, really love football, and they're like 10 to 15% of them. Like, they might not even be the best on the team, but they really, really love it. They love it. They're out there. They love it. They love everything about it. Then there's like 30% of the team who's like really good at football. They love it enough. They're passionate about it. But there are plenty of guys who are just really good at the game who like casually walk in, casually get out. They do enough. They might even be a Pro Bowler. But like, if you ask them, like football is like, they're like, oh, I would have much rather played basketball growing up or something like that. Like, there's plenty of those guys. So, and those guys, yeah, there's tons of guys that like, yeah, just want to avoid the ball in the fourth quarter, don't want to get hit. I mean, there's some famous receivers that don't want to get hit either. Like Marvin Harrison, some of these guys, like they'll just duck out of bounds early. But like, if you're that good, you're allowed to.
You find out pretty quick though, Shane, like who wants the ball. To go back to that same point, like especially on offense, right? Like who are the guys that like who wants the ball on 3rd and 2, right? Like, you know, and a lot of times you're like calling these plays and designing them. And to your point, like David probably got called a lot of these because you're the little option route guy,
Yeah.
right? 3rd and 2, we're moving the chains, we motion you do a stack, you win your isolation,
Yep.
and just like, you know, but you find that out real quick in practice. Everything's simulated, right? Like you simulate all this stuff all year round, right? You're going against your defense and who's going to step up on 3rd and who's going to win on 3rd and 5, like really win, you know? Who's got like that sense of urgency?
I was thinking about this for basketball because like football, the one thing what Alex and I were talking about, and Shane you mentioned about the physicality is like it's humility. It's humiliating all the time, right? Like everyone gets got, right? Like you're gonna get ran over, no matter how big you are, how the best player on the field, you're gonna get flipped on your head, you're gonna get knocked out, knocked around. Basketball, I feel like some guys just don't ever get dunked on. Like, but there's like you don't get humiliated. You might get crossed over, but like or are we wrong? And it just happens in practice. And we don't see it. Like everyone's getting dunked on.
No, it's like you guys. If you never get dunked on, guess what? You didn't play many minutes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so I got dunked on probably like 3 times in my NBA career that I can remember. Like that's pretty good. 13 years. 3 times. All right. Like Russell Westbrook got me. I was playing help side defense. I turned my head for a second. And this young Russ, when he was super athletic, came down the lane and caught me. I kind of jumped out of the way, but even my teammates like jumped up and like, oh, Shane got dunked on. And I said, you got to be on the floor to be dunked on.
Is there
And I
a
ran
quote
out
by
the court.
Because I do feel like I see this with defenders sometimes, like making business decisions because they don't want to get be on the poster.
Yeah.
Is there like
They're like,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least you went up for it, man. At
Yeah.
least you
Oh,
like
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
attempted to play
look,
some-
you think about the old time shop blockers, the all time greats, the Mutombos, the Alonzo Mournings, like those guys, they got dunked on so hard, but like that was just part of the job. Like, yeah, you get dunked on, but you're blocking so many shots and like it's an occupational hazard. But these guys today, they are so afraid to be on Instagram. They are so afraid to be on a reel, where everyone's clowning them, getting dunked on. There are a lot of business decisions being made on the floor in real time.
But dude, the thing about it is like that. This is not specific to sports at all, right? That's the thing that's like true. Like one thing, like truly in my career, I've worked for 22 years, and one of the best compliments I've ever received was after Amazon bought Whole Foods and like we like had our board meeting 6 months later and we were still like standing. And one of the board members was like, yo, like you guys like took a knockout punch from Amazon and we're like still here. Like, let's take a minute and like before we go deep on like, oh, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. Like 6 months ago, we didn't even know if we were going to have this board meeting. And to this day, I'm like very proud of that. Of like, you guys took a knockout punch from them. And so it's the same point of like, can you take a hit? Do you want to keep playing? Do you want to avoid the failure or do you actually want to go? Like, I actually think I really like, Dave, the language you even have of like, it's humiliating to get hit. The reason is, but then you just went and did it again.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, actually, you know what? Like, you know what happened after I got humiliated? It wasn't that bad. I just like did it again. And I think that like that to me is such a good lesson of like the slot receiver.
By the way, you're a long way from the sidelines when you're in the slot. So it's like there's not a lot. And they're coming from everywhere. Man, it's like.
Yeah, You're running. It's like close your eyes, drive down the freeway. That's what it's like playing receiver.
I do think though, one of the things I'll tell you, like, look, man, like, so Shane and Alex will not understand this, okay? But like, one of the excuses that people who are normal sized give to themselves for not playing professional sports is like, look, I just wasn't, I wasn't big enough. I wasn't blessed with the size that you need to get it. And I think you end up just totally dispelling this thing. I'm like 5'10", 190. Like, hold on, like I know a lot of guys who are 5'10", and they're not 190 in the same shape that you are, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the point is, it's a cool existence, because it's sort of like, dude, you don't have to be huge to go and play and to get real reps in the NFL. Like, it's a very inspiring thing, that kind of dispels some of the excuses that us regular size folks have for not playing professional sports.
You play 6 years the NFL, okay? Slot receiver extraordinaire. We become good buddies in Houston. By the way, like, I had never really hung out with football players before. It was the first time I'd ever hung around with, especially NFL athletes. This is how I got to know you, Dave. Mm-hmm. And there was a pool party at Matt Schaub's house, at Schauber's house.
Yes.
And I will never forget, like, there was a pickup game in the driveway. And it was like the most physical pickup game.
Yes.
It was barely basketball.
Yes.
Okay. It was like guys just throwing each other around. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's got some animals.
And it reminded me of like, do the same thing in the pool. Pick up ball in the pool is even better. Yeah.
Yes. Like people throw, it was like the most physical pool party I've ever been. Guys were just getting handsy and just like throwing each other. And I'm like, good God, like, this is a different culture, and like this.
Hey, Shane, before Dave answers this, I just want to ask you a question. How old were you when you got traded to Houston?
I was 25, 26.
Were you already married?
I was married.
What was Heidi's level of enthusiasm of you deciding you wanted to start hanging out with NFL guys?
Easy.
Right? It feels a little bit like you might have been like, hey, Shane, let's take a beat. You're already in one professional league.
Shaw was already married too. Shaw was already married.
League.
If you want to go to Andre Johnson's pool parties, that would have been a different decision.
I think my wife actually liked me hanging out with NFL guys, because look, basketball players are prissy. Okay, yeah. We are prima donnas, 100%. And so I think a part of Heidi said, you know what? I like you hanging out with real men.
Right. All right.
Handsy basketball players.
They are, by the way, handsy pool parties.
This is why I don't play pickup basketball anymore, because the last time I played, Patrick Willis headbutted me, and I got my tooth went through my lip, and I had to go to the emergency.
I don't know, Alex. I don't know if Doug McMillan's listening, but you've committed, to the Walmart.
I'm just saying.
I played pickup last night.
And Shane, you committed. We're playing end of July. Okay,
it's bully ball. But that's when David and I became friends. So we've known each other for a very long time from our Houston days, and now you've transitioned from record-setting receiver, Colorado State, 6-year NFL career, to a data revolutionary. Yeah. Okay, so instead of picking up blitzes, you are picking up
SQL spreadsheets.
SQL spreadsheet. So let's
SQL backend databases spreadsheet. Yeah.
People always ask me, like, how did you run data analytics for Miami Heat? I said, I don't know, like, kind of fell into it. So walk us through how you sort of got into the data world.
Growing up, I was a math kid. Did math mods and AP calculus and stats, and my dad was an engineer, civil engineer, built freeways, airports, big businesses, big, shopping centers and whatnot. And so very kind of engineer mentality to problems. And I always wanted to go to Stanford. Stanford is my number one school coming out. Tyron Willingham leaves Stanford and goes to Notre Dame. And so with it, my scholarship. Alex Smith will know this name, but Ben Olsen was my quarterback in high school. He was the number one recruit in the country.
Elite 11 my year.
Oh, yeah, Elite 11.
Yeah, Elite 11, number one quarterback.
He went to BYU out of high school, so like 40 minutes south of me.
I have a lot of Alex Smith, Ben Olsen random stories in my life. And then so like I wasn't highly recruited, but people were kind of like maybe trying to do like a 2-for-1, which I didn't understand at the time. they're trying to get Ben and I to go to Stanford, or Ben and I to go to Cal, or something like that. And then Ben goes to BYU, and then some of my opportunities left. I could have gone to Princeton. Ironically, Monty McNair of the Houston Rockets and Sacramento Kings was a receiver at Oak Park High School. He took my slot at Princeton.
Wow.
And then I thought I was going to go to Northwestern, but Colorado State recruited me hard, so I ended up at Colorado State. I say that because my parents at the time were like, hey, like, are you going to go back to school? What are you going to do after this? So I graduated CSU at 3.5 years, went and played in the NFL, and then I went to graduate school, got my MBA in data science. And while I was there, I met 2 AI research professors. This was way before it was cool and talked about by, housewives. Was that we were using machine learning to on what was called spatial temporal data, or as you and I would know, walk around like old school geometry data, over 4 up 2. Here's where the point is. And these guys, if you think back to 2013, like even cell phones were, if we were watching the GPS, it was like a street or 2 off. It'd be like turn left now, and like so it wasn't that granular yet. These guys were working with what had been adopted and adapted by a company called Stats. They took an Israeli missile technology, which tracks the Golden Dome was tracking missiles and shooting them out of the sky. Stats Inc. takes this and points it at NBA players, and that turns into spatial temporal data that our company was working with. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was like Moneyball on steroids. And I was like, in business school, I was good at math. I was like, oh, I understand this. I started coding. I started to understand kind of what it said. But what I realized is all these dorks understand the game from a numbers perspective. They understand the game from like computer science perspective, but they have never walked on a court or walked on a field. They don't know how to communicate to players or coaches or even front office that well. Like I could be that bridge. And at the time, Brad Pitt was just in Moneyball. So like couldn't have been, a better time to kind of get into the business. And the Second Spectrum gets off the ground. I actually call Shane and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And he's like, I'd do it. And so that was kind of how I kind of started. And then again, I've been in sports data, sports analytics, sports tech ever since. I found it really interesting to work in sports still. I enjoy all sports. I still play basketball. I played beer league softball. I played, obviously played football. So it keeps me involved in kind of all sports. I don't have to worry about recruiting 19-year-olds, or I don't have to worry about my job going from Buffalo to Denver to California in a matter of 4 years. And I had a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I went with Second Spectrum. We ended up growing that company from a coffee shop of 6 people to over 80. We sold that to Genius Sports, which was fun. And then started a new startup called Breakaway Data. But yeah, Shane and I have been the darlings of the Sloan Analytics Conference for quite a while now.
And a long time. And like when Second Spectrum came out, Alex and Robbie, like it was so revolutionary.
What did it do? What did Second Spectrum do?
So Second Spectrum was the first of its kind. So you got to understand the world of basketball statistics before Second Spectrum. Okay. There was, the way that people took stats and took advanced stats is literally someone in a room somewhere, with a notepad and a paper, writing down like every shot that was taken from every spot on the floor. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And, before Second Spectrum came along, Synergy Sports was kind of like the leader in the clubhouse. And it was better than anything else that had come along before, but there were so many errors. And they were the first company really to try to determine, how often does Carmelo Anthony go left? Okay. How often does Kobe Bryant go to his right hand? Okay. And it was still, it was better than nothing, but it was pretty imperfect. All of a sudden, Second Spectrum comes around. Second Spectrum comes in and they install 8 cameras, high-speed cameras, taking thousands of frames per second of every action on the court. And the level of data that was generated just from a single game was like mind-blowing. And the insights and the data points that they got from one singular basketball game, I mean, just was what an entire season on Synergy used up before. And so all of a sudden there's amazing models, which Daryl Morey and Sam Hinkie did better than anyone initially to model like, okay, what actually happens on a basketball court? For instance, creating models to know, like, okay, we know where everybody is on the basketball court. We know exactly how well a person should shoot from every single spot on the floor. Given the time, given the distance of the defender, any XY coordinate, and it was really, really revolutionary. And so that was like that was everything for me. When I learned how to use second spectrum data, I'm like, I don't know how I lived without this. Right, Dave?
Yeah, it was my spiel about it. It was a great way to describe it is that like every sport is about creating or taking away space, right? And that so when you have tracking data that is essentially measuring where everyone is moving, think about if you're watching the game like a hawk, like 200 whatever yards or whatever feet above, and all you see is like dots moving around. And if you were to pause it at any given time, like Shane was talking about, and I paused the game, I would see, okay, here's Shane guarding Kobe, and he's 3 feet away, and now Kobe is doing a move, and now Kobe is 4 feet away. So this move that Kobe did created an extra foot of separation, and you can program a computer to understand that. So we were like Shane was saying, we would tell you how much more distance Steph Curry's step back was getting you than James Harden's. We could tell you when you hedge this, like the level of granularity that you could dive into the game was insane. And so you could almost ask it any question, and if we didn't have the answer, we could program it to understand it and to pull out the answer. It was cool. And then you could apply it to any sport. Now, the granularity of the data is what ultimately prohibits you from the sport. Football is probably by far the hardest because it is, first of all, there's deception in the play. So like half the time you're doing something to deceive, and so you can miscalculate that and say like it was bad when actually it was a good job of trying to trick someone. Also, like everyone's action is not necessarily related to the other one, but it might be, and you don't know if it is or it isn't unless you are in the huddle. And so like it's really hard to program football. Pretty much every other sport is good, but like we got really good at football, and you see Amazon now takes a bunch of the stuff that we did on Amazon Thursday Night Footballs. But yeah, that was some fun times.
Getting all this data, we're starting to get all this data, and you can like create these models, but part of this is like figuring out what matters, like what are the stats that matter, right? Like what, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the hard part to your point, David. I think with football is like nobody's cracked that code yet, right? Like, because trying to evaluate a left tackle and a receiver and a tight end and a quarterback, like they are such unique positions, and they don't, their tasks and jobs are not the same. What are the data points that matter for all of them, and then even collectively? But in basketball, for both you guys, what are the main, like?
We still don't know the value of space. Okay, so we know that the best offenses in the NBA create space. Okay, you're watching the playoffs now in Indiana and Oklahoma. Like you never see the floor bunched up, and as a result, like the best players have more space to operate. Now, it would be amazing to know that like every foot of space is worth like 200 basis points in terms of efficiency or making or missing the play, right? We haven't figured that out yet. And we know great defenses, they do the opposite.
Yeah, take up space.
They take up space. And it's the same for football, right?
Yeah.
And so like we know what is good for us. We don't know why it's good for us. We're getting closer. We're not there yet, though.
No, this is the reasoning for the premium in basketball for the long wing defender who can shoot a three.
Yes,
because he can space the floor on offense.
Yep.
And then defense, he can cover a bunch of ground. He's long. And
I was looking for my book. Ravi will know this. Measure What Matters.
Yeah.
Classic startup book.
Yeah.
So, Alex, I think the answer. Shane, what was it called? You called me a couple years into your Miami job, and you were trying to do like, what is a heat man? It's like these 6 pillars or something like that. What was that?
Yeah.
So, Alex, I think a great answer, and this is probably better in business than it is in sports, and sports are trying to figure it out. Like the goal is like, is there a metric or a number? But the truth is there really isn't. You start kind of at the top. What is your head coach, your general managers, and your team president's belief in a process, in a system, and in numbers? And then like, if they don't like numbers and they're gut feel people and they're like Jerry Buss and they're out recruiting people and partying and whatnot, like there's no point in doing analytics. Like it's just going to fall. It's just a waste of time and money. It's not really going to work. But when you have a system at the top where the people are like, okay, we're open to it. Here's what we value in terms of the culture of our, of our team. Here's the mentality of the team. Here's the way that the style that we want to play offense and defense. Let's find what matters to us and what matters to our system and our process so that we could recruit better players and or find free agents, right? That's kind of how you do it. Because if you're trying to think about it, if you're trying to plug Michael Vick into the wrong offense, or you're trying to plug whatever it is, like a lot of times it's just fit. And what the numbers that matter to what make Michael Vick good are not what matter to the numbers that made you good. So like, that doesn't work. And that's how you find that often in business. They're like, oh, it's, everyone wants to talk about AI right now and they want to talk about OpEx, over, OpEx to revenue. And they want to say like, oh, I can get more per employee now. So that's kind of the number that everyone's looking at. A couple of years ago is EBITDA is what everyone was doing M&A. So everyone was talking about EBITDA and stuff like that. So it's like, it's the same thing in sports and business. Like these numbers and these kind of what you're measuring and looking at kind of go back and forth.
See, this is interesting though, because there's a few things. One, Warren Buffett's obviously been like fabulously successful, and his style of investing, value investing, people is always asking, why doesn't everyone do this? And Buffett has an observation. It's very simple. He's like, if somebody starts to tell you about value investing and they're not interested within 15 minutes in asking you a bunch of questions, you're wasting your breath. They're not going to do it. You can tell within 15 minutes if they have any interest in learning more about this or not. And I actually think that's just like you said about like team management or leadership. And so I think the first thing is like, does the person want to learn about this or not? Then the second thing is, I actually think this is a huge deal, Shane, what you just said earlier about like, well, we don't know exactly what the value is of 1 foot of space. That is actually like, it's like this tyranny of precision. It's like, I don't need to know exactly what the value is of 1 foot of space. I need to know that I need to take space or create space. Do you see what I'm saying? I actually don't have to have it be perfect in order to know that it is still accurate, to know that it is good for me to create space. And I actually think that a lot of the times what ends up happening, you talked about measure what matters. It's like, just because you can't measure, the flip of that is just because you can't measure it perfectly doesn't mean it doesn't matter. You see what I'm saying? And I think that that is sort of the thing that is the trick for analytics in anything, which is, let's measure everything we can. And let's focus on the things that matter within that. And let's also recognize there are some things that we know matter that we don't yet know how to measure, right? And some of the things you were talking about, like, are you a heat player? Are you a heat man? Some of that stuff is actually hard to like figure out exactly how to measure it, but you kind of know it when you see it, and that's okay. It's like, it's okay for there to be some intuition in there. I think this is where I'm actually very curious, Dave, for you, is sort of like, how do you deal with that? Of like, people probably put you in a box of like, they think that you are going to say everything comes back to the data and the numbers. And just from even talking to you, that's not the way you are. You're not saying everything comes back to that.
No, I always start with, if your players don't like each other and your players don't like your coach, you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to be in a football locker room, because I've seen, I've been a part of some really good teams and some bad teams where it's like, like we all read in the media that like the locker room is turned or whatever. Like, yeah, that does happen, where your position coaches can't get through to your players. Maybe they listen to your head coach, but no one trusts the coordinator and stuff like that. Like, at that point, analytics don't stand a chance, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one's believing, no one's trying hard.
My uncle used to say you can't make chicken soup out of chicken shit.
It is certainly a great tool in a toolbox. I think that there's still tons of opportunity around data and analytics, especially how it's getting tied more and more to video. Video is still very much the lifeblood of certainly football, but basketball and all these other sports, like the eye in the sky don't lie, is the phrase is repeated daily on a football field. And so but I think if you can tie some interesting data points that matter to the individual athletes to those, I think they would find that interesting. I charted my one-on-ones. Like, I always had a coach, because one day, my rookie year, I look over to the side and there's a guy writing stuff down. I'm like, what are you writing down? He's like, I'm charting everyone's one-on-ones. So I was like, why? He's like, we want to see at the end of the week what your one-on-ones were. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to chart mine to make sure you're right. And he's like, okay. So I would chart my own one-on-ones, and I would chart, did I get a good release? Did I run a good route? did I do a good top of the route, and did I catch the ball? So like I broke mine down into 4 categories. He just had win or loss. And so when I went back to check with Kyle, he's like, "Oh, you were like, 7 for 11 this week." I was like, "Bullshit." I was like, "I was 9 for 11. I won all my releases. I won all the top of the balls. I got 2 bad balls thrown at me." And he's like, "Holy shit." And so like we would have these real conversations, and Kyle loved it because he was like, he consumed information like that. So like at that point I realized what was important to me numbers wise was a little different than other people. How I can consume information was a little different. And like I look at video, and like if it gave me something like that, like you're talking about the value of data and where it's still opportunity, like if it gave me something like that, that would have been awesome. I had to do it myself. You can't expect like whatever computer, just maybe in the future you just throw an AI at it and tell it chart these different things. But like that would be different for me than it was for a different receiver, what they were focused on, certainly tight ends and position and people like that. So like yeah, I just think like video is still the lifeblood. Playing for each other. If you don't have any of those intangibles and all that stuff working for you, data's not going to work.
So that brings up a very interesting conversation and kind of brings us to your day job. So you're charting something. All right, Kyle Shanahan's charting that. Who should own that data? That's true. Like who should have the right to be able to use that data as they see fit? Which brings us to
Dave, I
breakaway
just feel
data.
like he just set it up, and you get to spike this one.
I wanted it cocked back a little bit further so I could Blake Griffin yam it. He put it right by the rim a little bit. I believe that there should not be an asymmetry in information between players and management. That is that is my kind of stance, right? In that traditionally in the last 10 years, like you wouldn't go to a team and say like I had 92 catches for 1,200 yards, and they wouldn't be like, no, you had 86 catches for 1,100 yards. Like there was no argument over what was information and what could be used. That has changed, and it is because players have a bunch of information extracted them off practice. They have a bunch of information extracted them off the game, and they don't get it back. And so while you're 24 and you don't really think about this because you're just trying to maximize contracts and have fun, like as you get older in your career, like, oh, maybe I should have made that extra $2 million when I was 24. Maybe I should have taken a little bit of care of my body when I was 27 so I can play when I'm 35. And so like you realize like the value of this information is drastically different between the beginning or early in your career versus the end, because you have a little more experience and realize the value. But I think that you should have that information with you from the day you kind of grow up. Like I even think when you go to combines and stuff for the Nike Combine in high school, you should have that information with you. It should live with you. It should be like a player passport that lives with you. There's no reason it shouldn't exist that way. You should take it from high school, college to pro. They have all the systems now. All the APIs exist. It's valuable for a player. You should be able to compare and contrast the way you feel throughout your career and take your numbers with you. So now, does that mean that a team isn't allowed to have their aggregated information and compare their 2025 team versus their 2023 team? No, they're allowed to do that. But the player should have there should not be an asymmetry of information is my stance.
If you had all the data that Dave mentions throughout your career, right? For both of you guys. And for you too, Dave, what do you think, if anything, would have been different if you take like the bull case? Like, let's say it worked really well. You were able to use it appropriately. You understood what you had. What do you think would have been different in your career if you had breakaway?
At the end of my career, I understood the importance of like weight and body fat, right?
Okay.
Being lean. Okay. And, but this is before a lot of the physio science, and I'd lift weights hard, and in the summer I'd bulk up because every coach said you got to be strong. So like every summer I would get up to about 235. I'd feel good, but every time I got to training camp, I'd lose everything and play at 220, and so all that hard work went away. And so I worked on the wrong things. And if I would have known like what actually was important, core strength, mobility, lean muscle mass, and if I saw my own data compared to my peer group, and I had that data set, I would have said, "Oh man, I'm wasting my time doing bench press. What the hell am I doing bench press for?"
What about you, Alex?
I completely agree. I think your ability to fight aging and or slow it down and combat it would be greatly increased. Like I've run 140 in my entire life.
Yeah, in the underwear Olympics, and Al Davis was watching.
Indianapolis,
Yeah.
the underwear Olympics. I'm a quarterback. I had to get into a track start and run a 40. I did it one time in my life and never again. And you do that along with a bunch of other drills. And I'm making fun of those drills because, yeah, I do think they're kind of silly depending on your position. But there are a bunch of stats, like the whole back half of my career, and this, just to give kind of color on this, the wearables became in vogue, right? And so I wore wearable technology every single day at practice for the whole back half of my career. You don't get any of that data. It's all for the team. So I would have loved to have known that over 16 years, and I really wished I had this, because it was obviously when I came back in 2020 after my leg, Washington would share us some of the data, like post-practice. Like I would get my top end speed. I would get my acceleration numbers. I would get how much it could tell you how much you're favoring your leg, right? And for a quarterback who plays in an asymmetrical position, right? Like I only throw right-handed, right?
Yeah.
I drop back one way. And you do get out of balance over time, right? And so for me to be able to combat that, to train functionally, right? Again, to Shane's point, like what matters? Well, I need to work on my mobility. And if I had the numbers, I could have seen potentially that, like, hey, I am slowing down. And again, the only thing I have is like look on tape, and tape's hard. You're at practice. You're not like necessarily going full speed. Like it's hard to get a sense of that. But if you had the raw data, like every day, like, no, I am slowing down. I need to work way better at my short area quickness, right? Like my velocity is slowing down on the ball, right? Like I got to fight to keep my arm stronger. Like that stuff, you don't get any of it. And the team is collecting a bunch, and I'm not even sure they really knew what to do with it, but they were collecting it. And it wasn't shared.
They were using it against you in the contract negotiation.
This guy's slow as shit right now. This guy can't fucking run.
In the investing business, a lot of the data that you have sort of exists in your head. And what do I mean by that? You decide what investments you want to sponsor. Cool. You kind of know how you felt about them. But then there's a whole bunch of other decisions that you give opinions on, which is like other people's ideas that they're bringing in. And it's actually quite humbling when you think about it, because there might be something you didn't like that turns out to be great. There might be something that you did like that turns out to be bad. And you actually you have to be very disciplined in order to keep that data. Like, do you write down what you think about every single investment? Do you rate, 0 to 10 what you thought about this? Do you then go back and look at it to see, are you good or are you bad on judgment? Like,
do you do it?
No, of course not. Of course I don't do it, because I don't have the discipline to do it. I think that, but the reason that you don't do it is like, also, it's like there's laziness, but it's also that, and I'll tell you in a second what I think we do okay at Sequoia, but there's laziness and there's also like fear of like, oh my God, what if I'm not as good at this as I think? Now, luckily, at the place I work, we do keep track of every vote. So we vote on everything, and then we keep track of every single one, of how, what did we think of those things, and it's very humbling, again, to like go back and look at the data. But I think that's very interesting. I think the second thing I was just thinking about from what you guys said is sports are actually ahead of business in this regard. There's so much stuff that's not available for data in business. Think about the business I'm in right now, right? We make decisions. We don't film our partner meeting. Think about how much data there is in the partner meeting, right? What does somebody say? What was their body language?
Ray Dalio does. Ray Dalio does.
I get it, but I'm saying that's
what is that unique. Reebok commercial where he was in the office tape?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you guys want real feedback from your commercials? Bring in Mike Sherman. That's what I'm
saying, right? And you look at it and like, dude, like you tell me, like in 10 years, if you're a business and AI is as good as we think it is, what are the chances that you're not, finding every bit of proprietary data there is about your business and then taking that into account as you make decisions? Like, sports are actually well ahead. All of a sudden in practice, you have wearables. Like, what is the equivalent of that to me? Like that it really is like sports is kind of giving us a hint of what's to come in the rest of the world.
Who by the way, David and Shane, what is the legal? I'm sure some of this is gray. Who owns this stuff? And like, can a team tell you to wear a wearable and you have to wear it? Can you wear your own and collect your own?
So Shane and I's good friend Eric Winston was the president of the NFLPA, and he was drafted with me in 2006 on the Texans, and that's actually how I met Shane. I met Shane through Eric, and the CBA, 2011 was the lockout year, right? And then we had another CBA about 5 or 6 years after that. We actually helped the NFLPA rewrite the CBA. At that time, data was only 3 sentences in the CBA. It was literally like, data can be tracked, blah, blah, blah. They didn't know what to do with it because it was 2011. Fast forward to 2015, we do this like huge study. We rewrite the entire CBA. It's like now like three or 4 pages within the CBA, just talking about data ownership, what they can collect and whatnot. Now, the hard thing about the CBA is you have to not only predict what is going to be tracked, because if you don't communicate it correctly in a CBA, like they would say, oh, computer vision doesn't count. Oh, no, that's a sensor. That's not a, you said device. This is a sensor, right? They end up arguing over all this stuff. I say all of that because 2 answers. One, still a little gray area in terms of player who owns it. But the biggest issue is when they own it. So like the first thing we did at Breakaway Data is like I had a bunch of my former teammates like ask for their data by the CBA, right? So I didn't know what I was doing. I'm in a startup. I'm like, hey, I took the CBA, throw it in a Word doc, put a bunch of stuff in front of it, below it, cite the CBA, had them sign it. I signed it, and it said, hey, third party asking for their data. Can we get it back? And we were like, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. And the San Francisco 49ers are like, oh, this looks legit. And then all of a sudden they're like, hit the brakes. And they send it to league office. Then it goes around the league office. And then it comes all the way back around. And like a memo goes out to every NFL team. Like apparently Dave Anderson and Breakaway Data is asking for everyone's data. Literally, I got the memo. I framed it. It's like, it's in the office on the other side. I was like, I upset the NFL. But they're like, we'll give it to you at the end of the season. And then the end of the season happens. And they're like, okay, well, we meant at an end of the league season. So, like, they just keep moving. They kept moving the goalposts. And I don't want to say it was, like, the NFL's fault. It was kind of everyone's fault. And it had never happened before. And there's just a difference between CBA and legalese versus in practice. And I still think there's a lot to be figured out there. The problem is as soon as we figure out one device, one tech, another one comes along and something else is tracked, something else is, and they try to fight it again. We're getting to a steady state here, though, where the NBA is by far the leader. They distribute all of their data back to players, medical records, training, performance data, everything you can imagine. They actually, every NBA player uses our application for that, so it's pretty cool. The NWSL, European football, where data distribution matters. Like, think about if you're going from your club to your country. Like, if I'm Mbappe and I'm getting paid, I forget, Real Madrid or wherever he is now, and they're giving me $40 million, and I go to France, who's giving me 20 grand to play in the World Cup, and I get hurt in the World Cup. Well, Real Madrid's gonna be like, whoa. Like, who's paying us? Like, how hurt is he? Where is his information? And so, like, they have to use us to distribute that information back and forth. So, like, it's slightly different league to league is what I'm saying, and how that information is distributed. There's GDPR laws that protect certain things. There's California data protection laws. There's CBAs. So, like, a long-winded answer just said it's a mess. It's different sport by sport. Some sports are forward-thinking and are trying to get ahead of it, and some, like the NFL, are traditionally reactive instead of proactive.
It does feel like, I mean, if you just go and like think about, again, we try to think in our business like the right side of history versus the wrong side of history. The way you make money is to try and be on the right side of history because time is on your side.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how dumb you're going to look in a few years if you're arguing that players shouldn't own their own data on themselves? Think about the argument you're making. It's like, this is them as a person, right? Like, it is how fast they move. They're not asking for the team's data. No. They're not asking for the other people's data. They're asking for their own, like how their body moves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, that is a crazy thing. And now you could make an argument that, like, I guess if you like come up with a new idea when you work somewhere else, it technically is owned by them. But like that's not what's happening here.
No.
You're talking about how you move,
Yeah.
And so I think that this is one that feels early and inevitable, Dave, that you're going to be right on this thing. And later we're going to look back and we're going to be surprised that anybody argued against you.
Yeah. I find, Alex, one thing I find interesting for you is biomechanics, though. Like how, in your injury, how you had to change your throwing motion, your body from the ground
Totally.
up in order to generate velocity. That if I was answering your question 2 times ago, like what data would have been interesting, I would have loved to
Yep.
see how you threw the ball earlier in your career versus later.
Yeah. And I would love, and I wonder how far this is off, right? Like I've done biomechanics stuff where, you guys, it looks like you
Video
put the
games.
dots all
Yeah,
over
yeah.
your body and you go onto a force plate and like they can obviously take all this stuff in and break down your throwing motion. How far off are we from collecting data off of tape though? Right? How far off are we from, hey, this receiver hit a max speed of 23 miles an hour, right, on this go ball in an actual game, not in the underwear Olympics trying to run a 40, right? Hey, this quarterback's, these are his biomechanics. He threw the ball, 50 miles an hour on this out route, that kind of stuff. Is that?
Yeah. So let me give you a couple examples. So when Shane mentioned there's 8 cameras that surround a basketball gym,
Yeah.
right? So the reason you need 8 cameras is what's called inclusion, right? Is at some point you have black players wearing black jerseys on the Brooklyn Nets who have this weird gray and black court.
Their court
And
sucks. It's the
and there's-
worst court to watch basketball.
And then there's 4 of them all
We always
running into
think
each
our
other at
TV's
the rim.
broken.
Yeah, and you're like, what? You're like, who is this, right? And so like that happens every once in a while for the Brooklyn Nets game. That happens all the time in the NFL, right? And so it's hard. Now, if you think when can I do it off TV? Like one, you want to make sure everyone's in film at the same time, and so that doesn't always happen in basketball. You think sometimes the ball gets ahead of the camera gets ahead of the couple guys back here, so. Does it even matter? You got to throw them out. Like, do you just throw them out or do you guesstimate where they were or how does that stuff, right? So that happens. Football does a pretty good job. You could back it up and do the all 22 and capture stuff sideline end zone. But then what you think about is like, all right, you could do that in the NFL and then you got to take out some of the stuff that happens closer to the ball with inclusion, guys cutting each other and laying on top of each other. Who is that? Like you and I couldn't even tell from film. Like data wouldn't be able to tell. And then you got to think about like you want to do this downstream where there's actually a lot more opportunity. Like then it's wildly different. I mean, think about mom and dad doing high school highlight tapes. You think about colleges, Colorado State, and then you go to Montana State, and then you go to of course Alabama's got good setup, but then like even Vanderbilt, it's like weird. You go to Rice, and there's 100,000 seat stadium with 22 people in there. Like it just what I mean, it doesn't like. They're just wildly different on where these computer vision cameras have to capture this information. So, like it can be done in sports. Soccer is by far the easiest to do. It's faux pas to wear green on a green field. So like they always have the colors right. The players are nicely spaced out. They're not running super fast all the time. They rarely run into each other. That's a great sport to do it. Baseball is the ideal sport for all stat collection. It's a one-on-one game. The parameters are known. Grandma's been charting it since 1917 with their book out there. And then, football is just kind of what we described in the beginning. Is just like it's such an interesting sport in that like there's a one-on-one matchup, but sometimes you're actually in a 3-on-3 matchup. Sometimes you're in a 5-on-5 matchup if you're an offensive line. Sometimes you're on a 11-on-11 play. Like you don't know unless you're in part of both the offense and defensive play calls what you should be measuring.
That's actually interesting though on why football is so fun to watch. The fact that it's actually difficult to break down into, these components is actually part of the reason that it's enjoyable. It's because there's so much going on any given play. Like it's kind of an interesting thing.
My favorite Kyle Shanahan breakdown was watching old Troy Polamalu film or Ed Reed film. And Kyle Shanahan, we'd be watching it for like 10 minutes. We'd be sitting there and we're about to play the Steelers. He'd be like, Dave, what coverage is this? And I was like, I don't know. And he goes, either do I. I've been watching it for 30 minutes. This single play for 30 minutes. Polamalu is supposed to have backside cover 2, and he runs through an opposite side C gap to make the play. I'm not sure, he has that ability. That's completely going rogue, like going from pass coverage to flying down, making plays. He's like, but he makes a play, so I guess he's just allowed to do this. I don't know how to coach this, and you're like, all right. But yeah, that happens.
So you make a compelling argument for all the physiological things that we can measure. Okay, I think everyone gets that.
Mm-hmm.
How does the argument change when we're talking about metrics of the mind? It's been a taboo subject in sports league, the ability to collect data on someone's ability to think under pressure, all right, or to even diagnose anxiety or diagnose depression. Does the thesis change for Breakaway when dealing with metrics of the mind and of the soul, and not necessarily the physiological metrics?
I was told that when I retired, went to the Cleveland Clinic to do the NFL mind and body assessment, that the mind is like the ocean, and that we know very, very, very little about it. Like we studied it, we know a decent, enough to kind of like guide us to a degree, but in terms of what we really know, how we think, how we process, and anxiety, and a lot of these things, it's still wildly unknown. I think also that means extracting that data is also very, very difficult. Like, how do you do it? When do you do it? What questions do you ask? I think people have tried to do like the how you feeling today, happy face, no face, kind of sad face type stuff. I think you bring up a good point in terms of like mental health, right? When I was growing up, like I think it was called mental toughness. It has changed since then and just called mental health. And mental toughness to me meant you're capable of dealing with the bad shit that's going to inevitably happen. And I think that conversation has changed. And so, but it's the same kind of thesis is like, how you deal with these pressures? How do you deal with these stress? How are you dealing with failure? I mean, some guys, I guess, how are you dealing with success, and how does that, how do you cope with that, or in the change of your reality, I suppose. But the data and information that come with that, I would say, would 100% belong to the player. I would say that they would have to be extremely comfortable with how that information is being extracted. I would say it probably shouldn't even be looked at by someone other than their very own trusted professional. Like that type of information scares me, to have like a receiver coach to have that information. That would scare me. He would be like, I told you he was soft. I told you he shouldn't throw the ball in 3rd and 7. Like, look at his BPAT score, like you're like, I don't know what it is.
I even think the same thing on some of they've talked about getting like sleep scores, having players wear a wearable, right, that the team could have. And I'm like, there's no way, right? Like your team could use this data against you, like your position coach.
What were you doing up at 4 a.m.?
Yeah.
What were you doing at 4 a.m.?
I was at Badioki getting wild, boy. Having a grand time. No, it's interesting. Ravi, I asked you this question as an operator investor. Like, people ask me about the transition from sports to business all the time, and one of my canned answers is transparency. When you're in a locker room, you are literally and figuratively naked. Like, I know everything about you. I know how much money you make. I know your responsibility on the field. I know like a lot of your personal issues, whatever, because I'm sitting next to you. We talk about you. I see everything about you, literally, figuratively. I get it. In the workforce, it's completely different. In that, like, you can't ask someone's age. You can't ask someone's, like, we really got to be careful about background, especially if you're a CEO hiring people. You got to be careful about the type of background questions. You certainly don't talk about equity or pay distribution with anyone other than that person directly. Like, to me, that transparency always allowed me a lot of mental space to perform. And I knew where everyone was. I knew the situation. To me, in business, it feels restrictive in a lot of ways. Like to be put into a like you're boxing everyone, and then they feel like just like a cog. I don't know how to break that feeling in some ways. Like, I don't.
Oh yeah, I
it
think
feels
it's
tough.
Dave, it's super interesting to hear you talk about it, because you've done both at a very high level, right? Like, this is real perspective from both. So first thing I tell you is I agree with you. And I think that the reason for that is that sports teams are optimized to win, whether or not they always do. Like, every decision is made to try and help you win. everything you just described is meant to minimize risk of getting sued. Like the reason you can't ask those questions is not because it helps you win. You see what I'm saying? Like, and I'm actually being dead serious. Like,
Oh yeah, we're laughing because you're right. Yeah.
yeah, but like it has nothing to do with winning. So it's actually like, oh, there's all these other things that prevent you from doing the thing that might help you win. Okay, fine. Now the question is, well, what do you do in spite of that? What do you do given the fact that you have certain restrictions that you can't do? So what do some people do? Like Huglione, when he was interviewing me for Sequoia, he said, he's like, I had worked at KKR, then I had worked at Instacart, and I was working at Instacart, and then I was talking to Sequoia, and he was like, I don't think I'm allowed to ask you what you get paid at Instacart. And I was like, okay. He's like, but I think you're allowed to tell me, which I thought was interesting. I thought it was like a great way of getting around the topic. And then he was like, I definitely think I can ask you about your KKR equity. He's like, and I'm certain you're allowed to tell me that, like one of those. So that was kind of a funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, on your point, I do think that what you just said, which is like you and me, we have to create environments where the team is optimized to win, which means like, yeah, guys, we're not going to all know each other's equity, right? But, we know that this person's getting paid more than this person. And we know that equity is a function of what you deliver. And so we are going to be real about that. We're going to talk about that. And like, you can get a lot more if you do A, B, and C. We know that we're not going to perform at our best if we all have stuff that we're holding back from one another. And I don't need to know about your marriage, but I need to know if there's something going on that's going to prevent you from playing at the highest level for the sake of all of us. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and this is where it's back to like, it comes back to trust in this thing. If what you said at the beginning of like, if your team doesn't like each other and if they're not going to listen to the head coach, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
I think that same thing exists in business, but there is more restrictions on your ability to like get that to happen. But I do think that really good leaders are able to create an environment where the team kind of wants to work together and they want to listen to the leader, on this stuff.
I definitely try to create those environments all the time. Right. And I like pretty much anyone who becomes a father or leads a business or whatever, you're pretty much, at least I think, cherry picking your favorite sayings and behaviors from coaches or men, and women in your past that kind of influenced you. Like I always appreciated Sonny Lubick was my coach at Colorado State, which, he, I don't want to butcher the phrase, but like pretty much he treated everyone equal, but not the same. Guess what? Alex Smith, like, you might have gotten a little trouble for the class. It was your first time. You're also our starting quarterback. We're going to let this go. But Dave, this is your 7th time getting in trouble. Like, it's going to be a little different and blah, blah. And like they would, at the surface as a player, you're like, whoa, they just both missed class. How come one's different than the other? And you're like, well, it's that's tough. And like, I feel that like there's those personality, your head coach knows how to deal with those personalities in a locker room. They know how to make sure everyone's comfortable, that they know how to make sure everyone feels heard. Certainly want to make sure that everyone feels appreciated for their work, what they're putting in, that they get recognized. Like it's all that stuff I find really, really interesting about sports and business. And that like, at first I was like poo-pooing on OKRs and like, okay, how do we do all this stuff? And this is annoying. But then you're like, oh, this is actually leads to transparency. Like everyone is communicating what they're supposed to do. And now we know, like, are you hitting those numbers? Are you hitting those, whatever they are, deadlines? This makes sense.
The luckiest and unluckiest part of sports is that there's a scoreboard, right? Like like the fact that there isn't that makes it much harder. I will tell you this though. You just said 2 things that made me think. One, Shane told us that Coach K told him, I'm not going to treat all of you equally, but I'll treat all of you fairly, which is the same point that your coach at Colorado State made, which I thought was super interesting. And then the second thing is, dude, you talk about learning from coaches. I learned from you today because I'm going to take this back to my kids, which is, it's binary whether or not you like taking a hit, right? But here's the thing I'm going to tell them. If you don't like it, you better learn to like it. Because no matter whether it's football or not, right, you better like learning to take a hit because they're going to come. Yeah. And the question is what you're going to do to respond. It's not okay to not like taking a hit. You know what I'm saying? Because whether it's in football or somewhere else. So I'm going to take that one of like, I like those things that kind of have a twist to them, which is like, well, you might not like taking it. That's okay. Actually, it's not. You have to like taking hits,
Yeah. Well, I wrote an essay in business school. It was an entrepreneur class. One teacher asked me why I think I'd be a successful entrepreneur, and I said I got fired from my dream job 5 times, and I kept coming back. And she was like, "You didn't have to write anything after that." That was my first sentence. And she's like, "You don't have." She's like, "That's all the resilience, the like, I'm gonna make it happen. I'll figure it out type mentality is really all you is like what it comes down to." And like you see that in business, like Breakaway we're sputtering. Oh my God, we got, it's like, how are we going to figure out this next 2 months? Like, how are we going to fund this? How are we going to get this product out the door? Like, there's plenty of times you can quit running a business, but like, if you're like, whatever, nothing. I got called my second year. I had an amazing training camp my second year, and my roommate was so confident that I was going to make the team. He called and pretended to be the Turk. So he called me from a phone number that I didn't recognize. And he was like, "Oh, I got you, blah, 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 thanks." I hung up. 30 seconds later, Turk calls me. I get cut. I wanted to kill him. And I was devastated. I was like, well, I could not have done anything better my second year. Got cut. Ended up getting bring back like 6 days later. But like the dealing with that, the emotional roller coaster of like, okay, this is my dream job. I literally did everything that I could do, and I still didn't make a team. Now I'm back. Now I'm done. Now I'm like, it was just like, if you can deal with that, you'll be all right. Can I ask you a question? I thought about this. What is a glue guy?
A glue guy is someone who creates an environment where others can be their best. That is the simplest definition of a glue guy. That not necessarily it may not be about their talent, it may not be about their skill, it may not be about their impact. All right, so this is agnostic to talent, role, position, but every glue guy and glue gal creates an environment where everyone can be their best self. And
I think there's a commitment level that comes with being a glue guy as well. That you are so committed that you will do anything and everything, like within your power.
It's funny. I thought about
To
this
help
last
to
night.
help the team.
I thought about this last night. I was like, I was definitely a glue guy.
Of course.
And I was like, the difference is we aren't called gold guys. Gold guys are so good they get away with whatever they want. They could be the prissy
That's
bitches. They
I like that.
There's a difference between a glue guy and a gold guy, right?
I like that.
Everyone has but the glue guy's job. So interviewing people. My dream interview would be able to play pickup basketball with these guys. I don't think there is any better way to understand if someone is a glue guy or they're a gold guy or they're blah blah than playing a couple ups and downs of pickup basketball. It, to me, is like the most telling thing in humanity of like, can you figure it out? Can you figure out your role, or are you going to be the guy that's making it rain, airballing 19 shots in a row and thinking he's the scorer?
Well, that's why my definition, which I actually thought both of these guys' definitions were amazing, but my first reaction was like, they are someone that finds a way to make their team better, no matter what, right? Mm-hmm. Like whatever it is, and that they go and our belief is that the teams are everywhere. It's not just in sports. It's not just in business. It's in your family. It's in your community. And so that's the other thing, that the people that we really admire are people that do it not just in like the obvious place, that they find places to go and be that way anyway. Like Alex's son was just in like the Woodside musical, right? The school musical for the 8th grade, because every student has to be in it, which is awesome. And this dude's doing set design, right? And, that's cool. But then there was a woman who actually, big glue guy listener, Courtney, who did the choreography, for this thing. And like, that is glue gal, like for the 8th grade musical, doing the choreography for Moana for a bunch of kids that maybe don't all want to be there, I don't know, makes the whole play better, makes the whole community better. Like, shout out to Courtney.
So our traditional last question, so we're going to flip it around on you, David. You have been a glue guy, founder, slot receiver, but who are the glue guys, the glue gals in your life?
Probably starts with my mom and older brother, where my parents got divorced when I was in 8th grade. My dad moves to the Philippines and Guam and kind of is out. Like I mentioned, my brothers are 10 and 20 years older. So my brother took on kind of like this uncle, older brother role. Like sometimes I laugh and I was like, probably wasn't good that a 22-year-old was giving a 12-year-old advice, but like, there's a good enough nuggets in there. And so my brother definitely was always that first glue guy being like, hey, here's the way things are going to work out now. Like he was at University of Arizona when my parents got divorced, and he was kind of like guiding me and being like, this is what life is going to be like a little bit. My mom certainly was the first. So then it was my mom and myself, basically from 8th grade, 9th, all the way through high school. And so like, she was just so, she let me be me. I would say was kind of the thing, right? Like it was tough. She didn't want to play the role of like the man of the house. She let me kind of like establish who I was, and she kept it together as I was going from thing to thing, life experience. And then she also gave me the space to fail and space to explore. And like right after high school, two weeks after high school, I left. I never came back. I went to Colorado State and I was gone. So I think those were the first two. I would say on team wise, which is really interesting. I'll never forget. Kyle Kegley was a big guy. Now he wasn't really a glue guy. He was our gold guy. He was our scorer. But when he wanted to turn it on, and when he had to like do the things necessary to play defense, to guard the best player, to do this, he was that guy. Wayne Myers was my first basketball coach, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, was certainly taught me the meaning of a couple of axioms that I use in basketball, which was like, don't ever turn down an open shot. We all worked really hard for you to get an open shot. And if you're not willing to shoot the ball, go somewhere else or go set a screen. Like, don't stand where everyone else would like to shoot the ball. If you're not willing to shoot, do something else. And I always like take that mentality. Like everyone worked really hard for me. I'm in the corner wide open, and now I'm going to pump fake and drive into 3 people and throw the ball away like you're an idiot. That applies to life.
Well, David, we appreciate you coming on Glue Guys. You are a glue guy. Congratulations on all your success with breakaway data. If you're a young athlete listening, check out the app. Have a chance to own your data, something Alex and I wish we had coming up through the ranks, and it's only going to get more important as the years roll on here. But we appreciate your insight, Dave. Best of luck to you, man. You're always a friend of Glue Guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate it.
David, thank you, man.
Absolutely.